So I'm going to make a confession that might make some of you angry, but I don't really care. I was never actually 100% opposed to the idea of reparations because I really considered it to be more of a branding exercise, making investments in things that are actually going to uplift previously underserved communities, and which you can frame it in any way you like. If you want to frame it about lifting up underserved Black and brown people, then fine, call it reparations and just be done with it, whether that be colleges or investments in Black-owned businesses or different community programs or, what have you. I was never actually against the idea of reparations when it was done in a way that would be investments in the community that would have the greatest possible chance of lifting the most number of people up and providing the most number of people more access to opportunity. I was never in favor of it with direct cash payments because, just like lottery winners, I think that money would be blown really quickly and would not actually have the intended effect. Now, I say that this kind of in the past tense because here's the thing. Well, two things have happened. Number one, under Trump's presidency, he actually made a lot of investments, including the permanent funding of historically Black colleges and universities. Obama didn't do that. Trump did that. Parts of his opportunity zones, investing in underserved communities to make it easier to start businesses in those communities. That was pretty rad. And if he had the chance to implement his platinum plan, you could have very easily painted all of this as Donald Trump being responsible for reparations. Because again, this is a branding exercise as much as it is everything else. And I'm not just saying that. The left is treating it like a branding exercise too. And in the way that they're speaking about reparations on their end, for example, I can point to you this article in the New York Post back in August, BLM organizer who called looting reparations dismisses peaceful protesting. The Chicago Black Lives Matter organizer who justified looting as reparations has doubled down, insisting this week, again, this is back in August, that even calling someone a criminal is based on racism. Ariel Atkins told WBEZ that her group 100% supports the violent looters who trashed chunks of the Windy City on Monday, again repeating her claim that it's reparations. They're using it as a branding exercise as well. And so now we get into this idea of have reparations already been paid? There's only been $2 billion in property damage at the hands of the Black Lives Matter protesters. Is that enough to say that we have done reparations in this country? What did Marianne Williamson estimate that was going to be necessary for reparations? I mean, Marianne Williamson put a pretty high price tag on it, but according to Black Lives Matter, if looting counts as reparation, that's $2 billion in reparations that have already been paid. But that might not be good enough. And ladies and gentlemen, we bring you to the most absurd article that I have read all weekend from The Nation. The votes of Black Americans should count twice. Vote reparations would empower us to replace oppressive institutions with life-affirming structures of equality. I'm really surprised Brandon here didn't use equity in that subhead, but really, I mean, maybe that would have just been going a bit too far. So this is simply an exercise in branding. If everything can be framed as reparations, do reparations actually mean anything anymore? I mean, this is the world in which we live. Let's read what they're arguing for now. Black votes in this country are worth less than white votes. Well, no. In real life, they're not. Well, I mean, actually, some could make the argument that Trump votes are worth less in this country than Biden votes. But no, I don't know that there's data to support the black votes being less. But let's keep reading. Joe Biden won the Electoral College. Because black voters in Atlanta, Detroit, Milwaukee, and Philadelphia turned out in significant numbers. Well, wouldn't that actually be an argument to say those votes are worth more? Wouldn't that be an argument to say that their votes are worth more than the average bear because they're voting in these cities, these densely populated areas that seem to decide for the rest of the state magically? And again, you could make the argument that people who don't live in cities, their vote is not worth as much as people who live in cities. This argument can be argued many, many, many different ways. But even with the overwhelming black support, 90%, 4% of Detroit voted for Biden, ! The outcomes in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania were worryingly close. I mean, she doesn't mention, or he, I suppose, sorry, Bradley, I accidentally misgendered you there because probably you're writing like a woman, but whatever. He doesn't mention that Donald Trump actually increased the number of black voters for him and the number of Latino voters and the number of LGBT voters, but, that's neither here nor there. One core problem is the Electoral College. Oh, here we go. Wyoming, which has just 580,000 residents and is 93% white, gets 3 electors because of its 2 senators and 1 representative in the House. Yes, exactly. That's how the Electoral College works, so that the country is not run at the whims of the cities. That is the entire point. By comparison, Georgia's 5th congressional district, which includes Atlanta, has 710,000 residents and is 58% black and has no dedicated electors and senators. That's because Atlanta is a city, not a state. This is not rocket science. They have no dedicated electors and senators and can only occasionally overcome the mostly white and conservative votes from elsewhere in the state. This devaluation of black votes allows our political system to ignore black lives, and the consequences are devastating. Maybe if the citizens of Atlanta want to be considered a state, maybe they should just all move to Wyoming. I don't know. Like, this is mind-blowing to me. The lack of acknowledgement that cities don't get electoral college votes in our system, states do. It's like social studies hasn't been taught in school. It's like all the things I have been complaining about with the curriculum in the schools changing so that people don't understand why the Electoral College exists and why it's actually a benefit for the country as a whole. It's like these things have never been taught in schools. I'm just saying. Unequal representation has led to unequal healthcare outcomes, which the COVID-19 pandemic has only worsened. Without sufficient voting power, black communities receive substandard education, and politicians are free to appoint judges who sanction mass incarceration, abusive policies, and electoral disenfranchisement. I'm sorry, who was responsible for the crime bill that resulted in the mass incarceration of black men? Was that Joe Biden? Yes, that was Joe Biden. Yes. Ding, 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 ding. But we don't talk about that. We don't say the quiet part out loud, especially because Kamala Harris is his running mate. And so Joe Biden cannot possibly do anything negative that would have ever impacted the black community. Like, say, you're not black if you don't vote for Joe Biden. Like, not meeting with Black Lives Matter representatives, which I have to say, I have to give Joe Biden props for not meeting with Black Lives Matter representatives. But it is ironic in the framing of this article in The Nation. Let's keep going. This is all by design. Indeed it is. The Constitution's framers set up the Electoral College to protect the interest of slave states. That's a blatant lie. Along with the Senate, the Electoral College was critical in the endurance of slavery and its continuation by all other means. Abolishing this system would mean the ballots cast by black voters, or any voters for that matter, would count the same. Yes, that is exactly correct. The ballots of every single voter should, in a functioning system, which is not what we have at the moment, should indeed count the same. But there's another way to undo the damage of the Electoral College and all other structurally racist political institutions. We can implement vote reparations by double counting ballots cast by all black residents. The poisonous legacy of slavery applies to black people regardless of when we or our ancestors arrived in this country. Vote reparations should also extend to Native American slavery. See, I keep telling you guys, P.S., I've seen this trend lately. You know how for basically since George Floyd's death, the only The only marginalized population we've been talking about are black people. Black people, black people, black people, black people. Pissed off a lot of Latinos because they aren't included. But now Native Americans are making a comeback. We saw this just the other day when that high school in San Francisco was going to remove Abraham Lincoln's name off of the school because he didn't say Black Lives Matter to him, but what they really meant was they were protesting his treatment of Native Americans. Native Americans are making a comeback. I'm sure the Latinos are going to be equally thrilled about that. But it's interesting. It's interesting to watch how their little hierarchy changes and adjusts with basically their whims, if nothing else. Slavery is rightly called America's original sin, but so too was the United States' genocidal seizure of land from its original inhabitants. Various legal forms of disenfranchisement have applied to them. It wasn't until 1962 that all Native Americans were allowed to vote, and even then they faced, and still face, electoral obstacles. There are not the only examples of American oppression. We should include in vote reparations others who have suffered disenfranchisement. Basically, okay, so they're basically making the argument that everyone's votes, except probably for white people generally, but probably specifically for straight, cis, heteronormative white men, probably those votes are going to count the least. But watch and see how this little argument plays out. One of the largest objections to monetary reparations is the impracticality of implementing them on a scale that would meaningfully address the injustices. Yeah, exactly. Vote reparations, in contrast, would be a simple, low-cost way to make amends by uprooting our entire system. Yeah, nothing could go wrong with this plan. It's just counting votes twice. That's all it is. All we want to do is count votes twice. I don't know why this is such a big deal at all. All we want to do is count votes twice. It's an easy, low-cost way to enfranchise marginalized populations. The idea is not entirely new. Theodore Johnson, a senior fellow at the Brennan Center for Justice, discussed a similar proposal in 2015 in the Washington Post. Oh, goody, because that makes it okay. While his plan to make Black Americans vote worth 5/3 has the poetic symmetry with the 3/5 clause of the Constitution, we shouldn't bind a remedy to the mathematics of the compromise that formalized and furthered the dehumanization of Black people. Their bargain allowed the very people who stripped us of our rights to have their votes counted for more, even more than other white people in Congress and the Electoral College. But it's not the only way politicians have legally denied representation to Black people. This country's history of poll taxes, literary tests, gerrymandering, voter purges, and intimidation should all be addressed. Trying a remedy to the 3/5 compromise implies the clause was the heart of the problem. It wasn't and isn't. Because you know why it wasn't and isn't? Because the process over the course of time worked to address that particular problem. The process worked in that case. It shouldn't have been written into the Constitution in the first place. And guess what? It was repealed because the process that the founders set up worked. But that's not good enough. Counting Black votes twice keeps the point clear and provides redress for myriad forms of disenfranchisement deployed against Black voters. Vote reparations would create possibilities to build what W.E.B. Du Bois called abolition democracy, or the practice of achieving a racially just society. Abolition democracy invites us to engage with abolition not just a finite goal, but as a radical process of challenging injustices wherever and in whatever form they might appear. But not if those injustices are towards straight, white, heteronormative, cisgendered men, I'm sure. Vote reparations would empower us to replace oppressive institutions with life-affirming structures of economic, social, and political equality. And if our elected representatives did not prioritize this transformational work, we could vote them out. Because white votes currently count more than Black ones. Double counting Black votes would restore our electoral balance. Vote reparations would be a giant step towards remedying our nation's long history of denying and devaluing Black votes. To address systemic racism, we must transform how we choose our government. Even if our vote reparations aren't instituted, Black voters will keep tirelessly dragging our states towards a more perfect union. But just imagine if our country, if our votes counted twice. Oh, I can imagine that country. I did a video right before this in which Black Lives Matter was literally protesting a children's cancer fundraiser. We can also imagine what that country might look like when Black Lives Matter leaders are talking about how looting is reparations. Billions of dollars of property damage. Yeah, sure. Let's talk about what the country might look like. All right, guys. That's all I've got for this video. If you enjoyed it, I do daily content, sometimes a couple videos a day, around news, politics, culture, stuff that I find interesting. If you enjoy it, please consider subscribing to the channel, giving YouTube the middle finger because they keep dumping all my new subscribers every single night. Every single night, they dump at least a couple of hundred subscribers from my account. So you want to make sure you're subscribed, make sure you got those notifications turned on. And like I said, I do post almost every single day. So if you aren't seeing my content show up, just give it a check back because there's probably something new. That's all I've got for right now. I'll see you soon.